recording is on.
So I'm really excited about today because today is Practitioner Sunday. So the talk you're going to hear 3 different talks today, and I get to do the contemplative. So I'm going to, I opened my own book, and so it is, and this is what I turned it to. So here's a statement that I'm going to read. Then you have a minute to contemplate it. And then Jackson will give us some music, a song, and then I'll do a treatment. And then he'll give us some more music. And then we go into our talks. So take a breath. I believe we're entering into a new paradigm, the age of enlightenment. The age of enlightenment is where our religion is kindness. We're full of compassion. We're realizing oneness and have a conscious awareness of how everything is consciousness.
The greatest thing in all my life is loving you. The greatest thing in all my life is loving you. I want to love you more. I want to love you more. The greatest thing in all my life is loving you.
So we allow ourselves this morning to step into that atmosphere of love, knowing that love is the greatest healing agent in the universe, knowing that love is what God is. And so we celebrate love in every way. And everything we see, we can sing this song to. The greatest thing in our lives is loving. So I know in this morning's service, we are open and receptive to hearing the messages that are been prepared by our practitioners with love for all of us. And we listen with an open heart, knowing that we get exactly what we need for this next week of this wonderful spiritual adventure called life. And this is good, very good. And so it is.
I want to know you more. I want to know you more. The greatest thing in all my life is knowing you.
Thank you, Jackson. You always embrace the contemplative with such good songs. Thank you very much. So, as I said earlier, today is Practitioner Sunday, and what fun this is going to be. What I know about our practitioners is that each one of them has been working for our community for many years. And they've taught classes, they've participated in the services, they've done treatments for you, they've done treatments for our center as a whole and for our country. They've written things for the newsletter. They're active in so many ways that possibly you don't know about. So today we get to hear three magnificent consciousnesses, and we're starting out with Susan Heese. Welcome, Susan.
Good morning, everybody. I'll have to be honest, when I first saw the title of today's talk, which was a cheerful receiver, my thought was, no, I have not been a cheerful receiver. This has been a trying time. In September and October, David and I lost 6 friends and acquaintances, culminating with the death of my brother-in-law. Who could be cheerful for all that? Then there's the COVID, the deaths. Our nurses and our doctors, you see them on TV in tears, just begging people to wear a mask. Our children being left behind academically because of the pandemic. Cheerful receiver? No, I'm not. And then there's the political circus that we have evolved into, I guess. But this is not how I want to be. I do not want to be somebody that's wrapped up in all of this chaos. I want to be a cheerful receiver. So how do I get back there? And the word that popped into my brain was equanimity. Equanimity. And I don't know, Angelica, do you have slides? Oh, there it is. This is a quote by Nyanaponika Thera, who is a Buddhist monk. Equanimity is a perfect, unshakable balance of mind, a calmness, an evenness, a way of being in grace all the time. But how does one get there? When I think of equanimity, I picture, like a monk walking down the street in his saffron robes and his sandals, just kind of gliding along with this little benign smile on his face where nothing touches them, which I know is not true, but that's what I felt. And how do they get there? How do they get to that spot? Because I know they go through the same stuff we do. I have another quote from Stephen Batchelor. A compassionate heart still feels anger, greed, jealousy, and other selfish emotions, but it accepts them for what they are with equanimity and cultivates the strength of mind to let them arise and pass without identifying with or acting upon them. Cultivates the strength of mind. So in our book group, we have been reading the great Buddhist treatise, the Bibles that are written by the Dalai Lama's cat. They're actually written by David Michi. He's been channeling the Dalai Lama's cat. And the one that we just finished was The Art of Purring. And in The Art of Purring, they give 4 tools to use to get to the state of equanimity. The first one is impermanence. And I believe there it is. Impermanence. We all know that things change. Everything changes all the time. These ideas are nothing new. We all have heard them, we know them, we live them sometimes. And I find that when we cling to things thinking that they're permanent, we stop the changes that are happening in our life. We stop the flow. But when we let go and know that this too shall pass, we open up the channels for change. The second one is why worry. I know my mother was a worrywart, and I have inherited that gene or that trait or whatever it is. So I know worry. I know about worry, and I know that does absolutely not one bit of good, that there's no way, that worry does anything. But the other thing that it does is it stops you from enjoying life. Every minute that you spend worrying is a minute that you are not appreciating the sun on your face, the sound of the rain on the roof, the purr of a cat, the hug of a loved one, the laugh of a child. Every minute that you are worrying, you are closing yourself out to a minute of joy, to a minute of happiness. The third one, which we know very well, is do not judge. Judgment. Judgment, again, is one of those things that stops the flow of life. When you judge something, you are stopping its ability to change, to move into some other possibility. You are closing yourself off. And the fourth one is no swamp, no lotus. Some people consider the lotus the most transcendent of flowers, and it grows out of the swamp. So when we find ourselves in the mud, in the swamp, in the mire of everything, we need to reach out of it, knowing that we can transcend this. We can be like the lotus and use the mud as a growing medium. So equanimity, knowing that nothing is permanent, that worrying does not one whit of good, that judgment closes one from what might be possible. And by reaching out of the swamp, we become capable of transformation. Practicing these brings us back to being a cheerful receiver, because we know that this too will pass. This is not permanent. And if we open ourselves to being a cheerful receiver, which is gratitude in a lot of ways, we can get back into the flow of things. When thinking about the year 2020, I thought about numerology and wondering what the year 2020 means in numerology. And it reduces down to the number 4. And these are my interpretations, so don't take them as gospel. They're just my way of looking at this. The number 4 stands for foundation. So this year has been all about foundation, and the foundation that sustains all life. And if you think about it, this year it's been about strengthening our family and our friends' ties. We've been given time to be creative and maybe get involved in new endeavors. We've given time to appreciate leisure, to strengthen our spiritual practices. We have been laying down the foundation this past year to be better, to be kinder, to be more compassionate, to be open to changes that are happening. And we've been strengthening our faith. And this is all moving into the next year, 2021, which is a number 5. A number 5 stands for freedom and creativity. Number 5 not only supports, but understands the law of change. So there will be change in 2005, but we'll also have the wonder of being alive, the stimulation of choice, again, freedom. Number 5 is we are going to be expanding. Next year, we're going to be expanding into something else. We can cultivate being a cheerful receiver because there's going to be a lot of cheerful things to be receiving. I ran across a Sikh prayer that in part says, when the future seems dark, my faith dares me to ask, what if this darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? We are being born again into a new time. We need to remember that we are not only cultivating our own faith, but we are standing in truth for others, knowing that this too shall pass. We are change with our faith. And Mark Nepo says it's not a blind faith, it's an open faith. We need to have an open faith. Excuse me. That is open to the current of life, the kind of faith that lets us be rejuvenated by awe and by wonder, to be grateful receivers, to be cheerful receivers. And so I'm closing with a quote from Anne Lamott. Gratitude, not understanding, is the secret to joy and equanimity. So I wish you all a very cheerful, grateful new period coming. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. That was very good. Our next speaker this morning is Michele Kamprath. and she has her own slides being a teacher. So I'm going to stop this share and she's going to put up her own. You know, one of the ways that I notice, I hope you guys know that if you go up to the, if you're looking at everybody's picture and you go up to the left-hand corner, right-hand corner, the view thing, then you can see the person speaking much better.
All right, good morning. Well, thank you, Susan. It was a very relaxing talk, which is good. I think that's just what I needed. And I heard that you mentioned the Dalai Lama's cat, and actually the title of my talk is Cultivating Your Inner Tiger. And I noticed that there might be a presidential cat moving into the White House. I know there's 2 presidential dogs, so I'm hoping they will also have a cat. So my talk is really different from Susan's, but I also am going off the same theme of a cheerful and grateful receiver, but I had a different take on it. And just like Susan, you know, with all the external stimulus, which can be really chaotic with the election that has happened and actually getting the president-elect into the White House, and also just the COVID and not being able to see our families as much. I mean, all this kind of external sort of chaos can sometimes lead to a lot of inner turmoil as well. So I just think it's really important that we remember ourselves that we are much greater than any turbulence going on around us. And for me, I know I just have to take the time to listen to spirit, and allow myself several times a day in my spiritual practice, whether it's being just meditating or doing prayer treatment or gardening, just to really allow spirit's voice to move through me, because oftentimes I know that I can get really busy and it's a little harder for spirit to come through to me when I'm really busy. So anyway, I've been working on that, and that helps a lot. And, you know, breath is always good. And I found this quote, well, these 2 quotes from Margaret Stortz in the Current Science of Mind magazine. And she reminds us that we are often all too willing to forget that we are people of power. And we have it within us to be amazing elements for the movement of divine good at every moment, if we so choose. Of course, that's the clincher, right? If we so choose. So some of my short talk today comes from Michael Mead's book, Fate and Destiny. And as probably you all know, I've been reading this book for a couple months at least. And he's a storyteller, a poet, a mythologist, and he has some really great things to share. And a lot of it comes through as stories. But he had this interesting thing to share about pearls. And Susan just talked about the lotus, you know, growing and blooming out of the muck of the swamp. And Michael Mead talks about pearls. So he said that a pearl is created first from an irritation, from something that's not wanted, and from there, it becomes a thing of beauty. So oftentimes it's a grain of sand that gets into the oyster, and then it puts out, I don't know, I think it's aragonite and some other mineral that forms around this grain of sand to create this beautiful pearl. Now, I don't believe that we have to have these irritations in our lives or some kind of external chaos in order to find the pearls in our lives. I really do not believe that, because these pearls are within us, and by listening and by doing daily spiritual practice, they come forth. But isn't it interesting, and we can probably all relate to the fact, at least I can, that sometimes our greatest lessons in life and our biggest growth spurts do come from an event or a time that wasn't exactly interesting or pleasant. You know, it's just those lessons that come through that maybe we don't appreciate at the time. But again, we don't have to have some kind of external or internal chaos going on in order to create pearls. They're always there. So I have for you today this story by Michael Meade, and it's actually an Indian folk tale, and it's called The Tiger and the Goats. So I'm going to read this to you, and hopefully it goes well with our message this morning. There was once a very pregnant and hungry tiger, and she roamed near and far, looking for food to feed herself and her growing baby. As she climbed a rock outcropping, she spied a herd of goats below. She crouched low and leapt, determined to catch her dinner. And as she jumped, she succumbed to hunger and exhaustion and fell to the ground dead. Well, the impact shook her body, and of course the goats ran off, but it caused the baby tiger to be born right then and there. And the goats, seeing that the mother was dead, drew closer to the newborn. Seeing the helpless creature lying in the dirt, they began to lick it. Pretty soon the little fellow was all cleaned up and of course hungry. So that, it wasn't disappointed. It started nursing on a mother goat because the goats had come in to nurture this little baby that was born. So the little tiger nursed and grew on goat milk. And as the little fellow continued to grow, he followed around his goat mom. He played with his goat friends and, in general, just acted like a baby goat because that's where he was. Well, as he grew one day, another tiger climbed that same rock outcropping, looking down again to look for some dinner, spied the same herd of goats, only this time he was surprised to notice that amongst the goats was a baby tiger, not a goat. So the tiger leapt down into the midst of the goats, who of course scattered, but the little goat was so enraptured by this big tiger that it just continued to stare. And the little fellow thought he was a goner when the adult tiger picked him up by the scruff of the neck and took him down to the creek. And as the baby looked down into the water and saw his reflection, he realized that in fact, he was not a goat, he was a tiger. And so from that day forward, he took the lesson of looking at his reflection in the water, and he roared and roamed like a tiger, like a little self-actualized tiger. So from inward, he became the tiger that he was. Now, I don't know the end of this story. I like to hope that maybe the tiger and the goats were friends, but I don't know if that is true. So I thought that was kind of a fun story. So Ernest Holmes said that God cannot give us anything unless we are in a mental condition to receive the gift. The law cannot do anything for us unless it does it through us. Belief is absolutely necessary to right demonstration. So the questions here are, will we be cheerful and grateful receivers and allow our inner tiger to come forth? And then I leave you with, can you become yourself in a way that adds a blessed roar to life? Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. That was good.
Thanks.
All right, our next, let me turn this one up. Hold on just a minute. Our next speaker is Pamela Kelley. So let's welcome Pamela Kelley.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to Michelle for always an unusual and wonderful view of the world. And thank you to Susan. Susan's one of the practitioners who is always so honest and often says to us, that's not how I'm feeling, let's talk about it. Because sometimes as a practitioner, we try to be all things perfect. And by gosh, we're human too. So I love them both very much for that. I was really struck by the talk title, the Grateful and Cheerful Receiver. because it brought back a couple memories for me that were gifts just to be remembered. And I wanted to share them with you today. Many, many years ago, when I first started to be a member of Eureka Center for Spiritual Living, I was asked to join the council. And that year we were able to go on a retreat. And we went up to Gasky. We stayed at a nice place and we stayed a couple days. We had meetings. And one of the exercises that we did was, I guess you'd call it a trust walk. We paired up, and one of the pair was blindfolded, and the other person was their guide. And basically what we did was, there was no talking, but we led the other person, the leader led the other person, and if you'll accept the expression, showed them the environment without talking, just with touch, with scent, and with sound. And it was fun. I paired up with a lovely lady, and she was first, and she gave me quite a tour, and I was able to touch the cat. That I went back later and looked at the cat, and it was asleep, and I poked it to say hi, and it opened these beautiful green eyes. And it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. There were lots of wonderful experiences, but when I was the leader, it very quietly began to rain. And we were on a covered porch. And so I led my partner to the edge of the porch, and I indicated by touch that I wanted her to reach out. And she reached out, both arms forward, and the raindrops hit them. And she was so instantly delighted. She danced a little jig, she clapped her hands, she laughed like a child, and she kept reaching out and bringing in the raindrops and patting her face, and reached out and brought in the raindrops and patted her face. And I was so blown away with the experience of her joyfully and gratefully receiving the experience I had offered to her. It just absolutely reduced me to tears. She was so spontaneously appreciative. And it really did. It changed how I thought of so many things in life. And I've never forgotten the gift that she gave me by receiving my gift with joy. Sorry, a little choked up there. Another experience that I had was a personal epiphany, and it had to do with giving and receiving. And I wanted to share it with you because, again, this was something that 40 years later, I still remember so clearly. I had a friend named Anna, and Anna was quite financially abundant, and she was also extremely generous. She was generous with everyone. And my experience of her generosity over a period of years was interestingly up and down. I had gratitude for certain for her generosity, for the gifts that she gave, the things that she shared. But it also allowed me to process some of my hidden beliefs about prosperity, or people who were rich, or my being prosperous. And I went through several things over the years. One of those had to do with seeing people who took her for granted or took advantage of her. And that was a fear that was revealed in me, that I was afraid that if I was prosperous, I might be taken advantage of. And I watched how she handled that. I noticed that there were no strings attached to her giving. And I noticed that it was often spontaneous, but I realized that behind the spontaneity was her absolute belief in her abundance and her flow. And so she would often seamlessly give, and yet I began to see that there was planning in that. And the planning was not, what will I give, but from what I've received, what can I share? And that was revelatory. I was a little concerned sometimes that I might be manipulating, or I might be trying to get her to give me things. And so I had to be real scrupulous in my own actions of how I viewed a need that I might have. And I realized that sometimes my go-to position was, who can help me out of this, or who can fix this for me? And I didn't like that feeling. and it allowed me to process it. I didn't want our friendship to be defined by her having and me needing. And so I learned to be generous. I learned that the generosity from time to time needed to fall to me, and I would pay for the meal occasionally or give a gift. Even though it was from a limited place, it felt abundant to be the giver. And I noticed that the consistency of her giving gave me space, and I learned to say no, thank you. I learned to discern if what she was offering was something that served my life and was needed, or might be better turned down and could go to someone else to whom it could better serve. And so I went from invisibly perceiving myself as needing, to perceiving myself as having the ability to say yes or no. That was a real gift. And it came from the experience of just the friendship and her generosity. Anna and I'd become aware of the work of Father Leo Booth and his books and his talks, and he was quite humorous. He was known as the Dudley Moore of the Unity Church. And he was going to give a workshop down in Southern California where Anna lived, and she promptly bought me a ticket and flew me down there and put me up for a couple days. And I got to witness, by staying with her, the constant overflow of her life and how seamlessly it seemed to happen. And I began to discern just very subtly that it came from within, not from without. And we went to see Father Leo Booth, and he was as wonderful as expected. He gave a wonderful take on the Serenity Prayer. He gave it in the present first person. I think later he did become a religious science minister, and I saw the seedlings of that at the talk that we went to. But we had a wonderful, wonderful time. We visited some parks and did a little bit of sightseeing, and it was just really great. And I had gone out to run some errands, and I came back and I pulled up into the driveway, and I was thinking about going in, and I knew there'd be a sumptuous meal, and I knew that there'd be lots of laughter. And all of a sudden, something broke free in me, and that was, I want to be the giver. I realized that I had put myself in a position of who's going to help me, who's going to fix this, who's going to make this right for me. And I was in the presence of someone who had shown me for years that by being connected to spirit and source, she was the conduit of generosity. And in that moment, I wanted to be my version of that person. And it was truly an epiphany. It was a realization that I didn't need anything except a connection with spirit for things to work out, for things to reveal them, solutions to reveal themselves, and prosperity to flow. And I did feel in that moment an understanding of what's very often quoted and often misunderstood, a scripture that says, "'Tis more blessed to give than to receive." And what I understood in that moment is it's more blessed because when you're connected and you give from your connection, you're giving and you're also receiving. And it brought me back again to the retreat and to the joyful receiving that I'd experienced from my partner. And so in that moment, I became a different person. I became a better person. And I stepped into my givingness and my abundance and my generosity in a way that I never could have. And I always used to tell Anna that she was my icon for rich people, because there were never strings. There was never a sense of, oh, you poor thing. It was just spontaneously giving from the overflow. And it really made me a better person. And that was what came to my mind when I read this title. So what I humbly wish for everyone, each of us, is to have these moments of clarity and expansion, and to experience, just even for a moment, the act of giving from love, receiving from love, and being love. And namaste to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. I forgot to, when you did your first story, I should have flipped it to this picture. I can just see the little child in you as that woman who was experiencing the rain, and as you were experiencing her. It's a beautiful concept. So Pamela also wrote the affirmations for this month, and our last one is, let's say it together. Knowing I am living in the divine flow, I receive with cheer, and I allow the all good to flow to me and through me as part of the continuity of life. Today, I am aware of the circle of life. Let's go into prayer. I know for each one of us that we are human beings. We are filled with feelings, thoughts, emotions. And I know for each one of us that we also know that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And all of these things are here for us to experience fully. So I know that as we move through this next week, that we take something from each talk we have received this morning, and we allow ourselves to add to our spiritual toolbox so that we can feel our feelings and yet move forward. Feel our feelings in every way possible, both the good and the bad, what we might judge bad. I know that we can let go of all judgments now. We can be those cheerful receivers. We can be sad, we could be angry, we could be whatever it is, as long as we don't stay there. But we experience it fully and move on. All of this is part of being human. And I know for each one of us that we remember that there truly is only one life. That life is God's life. And this is the life that we're living right here and right now. I know that as we move forward, we do so with an expectation, an eager expectation of growing, of learning, of becoming even more fully who we truly are. I know that we do this with grateful hearts, absolutely grateful hearts. So I release these words into divine law, knowing that they are so. And I know that each speaker gave us something, some pearl of wisdom that moves us forward. And it is good. It is God. And so it is.